All right, I'm glad that you're back to Grimmett Coaching. Today we're going to talk about fixing the property. That's the most exciting part where people always want to jump into immediately, right off the bat. Let's go find a property and get started. And it's also the phase where people get excited and you see on TV they bust out the sledgehammers and they're tearing stuff up and throwing stuff out the window and the doors. But beyond that, first 10 to 15 minutes, it all goes down pretty fast. But this is the phase that is the most crucial phase of all of the components of real estate. Depending on how your rehab goes out, how you control your contractors will determine whether or not you make that profit that you want. Even if you bought the property correctly, you have your money in line, if you do not control your contractors well, if you over improve the property by buying the materials that you spend too much money on, or your timeline goes too far out, meaning that you started the project but your contractors aren't showing up for work, this can become a disaster really, really fast. So this is the part where I work with the students the closest in order to keep a tight rein on the first 3 projects that you walk through, because it's critical that you understand this process. Not that you're perfect in it as you walk through it, but first of all that you understand the mechanics and the method of how we do the things we do, make sure that we put the proper paperwork in order, that we have a legal grounds in order to come back and control our contractors, that you can make an understanding of how you're documenting the process so that you can do this again. The key to real estate is that the properties change, but the process stays basically the same. You're going to purchase it, you're going to fix it up, you're going to sell it. Yes, that is the basic process, but there are lots and lots of steps in a rehab that can go wrong. So let us begin first of all with what is the intended purpose of this property that you're going to rehab? Is it going to be a buy and hold property or will it be a fix and flip? The materials will be drastically different on those properties depending on what style of rental you have. If you're like me, I'm in the C and D properties where it's right outside the war zone and not fully in the war zone, are the cheap, inexpensive properties. As opposed to your rental flip or your retail flip, you're going to have a property that's going to be a high-end fix, so the materials would be drastically different. Also, the rehab specialists could be different also. You can have different grades of carpenters out there. I have a less expensive contractor work on my rental properties that is kind of a jack of all trades, where we're mostly doing a fix and flip rehab, light rehab, make-ready process on a rental property. And that level of contractor may not be as critical as a person who's putting in granite countertops and tile and sanding your floors and so forth in your higher end product. So the very first step that you're going to have to take is what style of property am I rehabbing? Because you want to make sure that your contractors and materials match up. Now, let's assume that we've closed the property, we're just moving on, you finished closing, you've got your keys from closing. What is the next step that you're going to do? Well, the first thing that you're going to do is go to the property. I usually have the locks changed at that point. It depends if it's been vacant for several years or you're buying from a homeowner. If you're buying from a homeowner, I typically switch out the locks. If it's a foreclosed property, it doesn't really matter. No one's been going through the property for years. So I'll keep those locks on, because after my contractors leave the property, then I want to switch to a whole new lock set, because most people have gone through. There's no need for any contractors to come back. And if you make any contractor upset or you release any during the rehab, you don't want them to have access. Even though the key is in the lockbox, doesn't mean that they didn't make a copy and that they have access to your property. So the first thing we're going to do is go to the property and secure it. If you're in a war zone area, you want to make sure that you take out all of the windows in your basement and put plywood on so that you can't gain access, kick in the doors, kick in the windows, put bars against your windows, and securely secure the door so that no one can come into your basement and steal your furnace or your copper or your electric lines. Once you secure up the basement, you're going to make sure that you've got your lockbox on your property, and most people hang it on the front door. You can find another secure location that maybe isn't in plain view of people driving by your property. And then there's the lockbox code. If you've got several properties going on, you may not choose to use the same lockbox code, because if somebody knows how to get in one property of yours, they know how to get into all properties of yours. Whatever you do, make sure you write the lockbox code down so that you have a reference of where it is in the way that you handle your business. The next thing that you have to do is make sure that you have your utilities turned on. You want to switch on, make sure the utilities are in your name the day of closing. Also, you want to understand the order of turning utilities on depending on what time of year it is. Generally, electric is the first one you want to have turned on no matter what it is. And in that case, you need to have all the breakers turned off in the breaker box. So that's one of the first questions they're going to ask you: are the breakers off in the electric box? So when they turn the electric on, you don't have a feedback problem. The next thing, depending on the weather situation, if you want to get gas turned on or you want the water turned on, depends on the time of year. If the water will freeze, you don't want the water to be turned on before your gas is turned on, and vice versa in the summer. Also, you want to make sure that if the water is turned on, that your plumbing is intact. You may have leaks, or you may have a crack, or a burst elbow. All those things, you want to be there typically when they turn the water on, or make sure that you've got the water valve turned off. And even though you have it turned off, even in a house that's been sitting in a foreclosure status, it may not have been worked on and off. So you may shut it off, but it may not be completely off, which then would create a leak or a drip. And you don't want to have a mold situation start off in your property, especially if you buy a property and it's maybe 2 or 3 weeks before you go in and see what you just purchased. That's called a nightmare, and you don't want to have a nightmare right off the bat. So once you get the utilities turned on, you have the keys changed, you've got a lockbox on it, you've got a secure house, you may want to put a portable security system on it. One of those where it's a cellular device where you put the contacts on the door, you got a smoke detector, and it's just got basic coverage on it so that if anybody comes into your house, you know about it. All of them can be operated from your cell phone nowadays. It's about a $500 investment. Very, very good investment. Most of my students purchase that, and they move it from property to property to property. It takes about 30 minutes for you to install it, and it's a very, very good investment. The phase after that is demolition. What are you going to demo? Meaning what, obviously the contents of the house you're going to take out, what on the outside that you're going to throw away. And then there's generally 2 different methods you can do in demolition of your property. Being you can set a dumpster on the site and have men come in and throw the stuff in the dumpster, or you can hire people who have trailers and trucks or so forth who load the truck and then disappear. Depending on the neighborhood, I rarely like to have a dumpster sitting outside my house more than 2 days. It alerts everybody, hey, the house has been purchased. It signifies those people who may want to come in and steal things. Whatever it is, you need to get in and get out. So if you're going to hire the guys that have the trailers, that's great too. Just understand you are letting everybody know you have just taken possession of the house. And in addition, in our area, you have people who like to help you fill the dumpster. So if you get one of those low, flat dumpsters, you may have, filled it 25% one day, and you come back the next day, and everybody's mattresses and stuff out of their garage. Now you have a full or over full dumpster that you get to pay for. So that's another consideration you have when you have a dumpster setting in a particular area. But you'll know, based on what area that you're purchasing in, whether it's safe to leave a dumpster open or not. The other thing that you want to consider is, are you making an open structure? Are you opening and demoing any walls? Do you have drywall that needs to be removed? Is it, say, molded or basement? Or is it just a weird configuration that you know you're going to have to tear out? Are you taking your kitchen cabinets out? Are you opening the bathroom, taking it down to the studs and starting over? Make sure you're very specific about the demo and what is demoed in the house. I generally like to go through and spray it, an X on it or whatever I want to come out of the house, so that when I come back, if I'm not there all day with the demo people, which I rarely am, you know that the products that you marked is going to be removed. Also, if you have hardwood floors, you might want to let them know, do not pull the tub across the hardwood floor, because it's going to scratch it up. Any type of protecting, the traffic zones, put the paper down over your hardwood floors. I'm telling you, the things that you don't tell the demo crew, because generally the demo crew isn't your most highly skilled individuals. So if you don't tell them how to demolition the property, you may have an area where you create more harm than you have benefit. So remember, instruct your demolition and give them a time frame. When are you getting in and when are you getting out? Now, once the demo phase is all complete, the next phase you're going to do is your walkthrough. Your walkthrough is determined so that you can come up with a scope of work. Now, scope of work can be broken up into two different ways. The scope of work is basically telling your contractor, these are all the items that I want you to repair or replace during this rehab process. You can split it up into contractor status, and I'm talking about a roofer, or an electrician, or a plumber, or HVAC. You can say specifically, these are all the items that I want you to address as the electrician. For example, you want the electric box changed outside. You're also going to have to run GFIs for your kitchen and your bathroom. If they're not there already, those are additional circuits that you want to let them know about that they're going to have to put on their permit. So that's just an example of a particular way that you need to line out each item and each particular thing that you want done for your specific contractor. Then another scope of work way that you can do it is per room. You walk in and you talk about all the things that you want done. You want the ceiling painted, you want the light fixtures exchanged, you want to switch out all the outlets and plugs, you want white plugs to go back, you want the walls painted this particular color, you want the trim to be taken out and you want trim to go back with a particular color, you want carpet in, or you want the hardwood floors refinished. Each specific room you walk in and detail out every single thing that you want done. I like to do it both ways because as you hand off the request that you need for your contractor, that may be different in each room. So that's one way that you come up with a scope of work. Now, it doesn't have to be exhaustive and totally complete this first time around. There's going to be things that you see and miss as you walk through it more and more with different contractors and with your coach. Once you've created your scope of work, from that scope of work, you should be able to pull off a material list. A material list is what you're going to go to Home Depot or Lowe's or Menards and begin to take down ideas of what the costs are going to be, or determine what level of material you're hoping to use, say different lighting fixtures, your cost range, different vanities, what you're going to put in. Are you putting a high-end vanity in, or you're putting a mid-tier vanity or a low-end vanity? What type of mirrors are you putting in? What type of tile are you purchasing? All of these items you want to determine and get, of course, put the item number, and you'll be able to use our software, which shows you in different categories and bands the number of items that you need, multiplied by the quantity, multiplied by their SKU number and price, and it'll extend out on your Excel spreadsheet and give you a rough idea of what the cost is that you're going to need for this project. The other item that we ask you to look at during this phase is how to begin to estimate your labor cost. When I engage my contractors, I normally just ask them to give me a labor price, and I'm usually figuring that on a 3-man team. That's typically one lead man who knows everything. You've got another competent contractor, and then there's always the gopher, the guy who just gets paid $8 to $10 an hour just to be an extra hand. He can do some painting and so forth, but those are typically the teams that I look for. And then typically, how long is this project going to take? On a normal rehab, it's where you're going to go from 5 to 7 weeks typically on the average rehab that we're doing on a $20,000 to $30,000 rehab. That's pretty typical in the time that you're going to have to do that. The next thing is, how do you coordinate getting the bids from your contractors? Normally I allow for a 3 to 4 hour window on one day that you're going to bring all your contractors through, and you're going to give them a 30-minute window in between each other. Now you can have multiple contractors at one time. Say you have the electrician, you have the plumber, and you have an HVAC guy. They're all at the same time, but then 30 minutes after that you have the next set of 3 come through, electrician, HVAC, and plumber, so that you can begin to walk them through and give them the scope of work, each one written down and typed out, so that when they walk through the door you can give them, here's your scope of work I want you to bid on. Walk them through if they've got questions. And it's also a time to write down any things and suggestions they give you, because code may have changed since the last time you talked to them. They're going to update you on the new code requirement, or they may give you an easier way to do this particular process that may save you money. So you want to make note of all those things and change it so that as other contractors come in, you can give them that change so that they're bidding all on the same process and they're bidding all on the same scope of work. That's very important when you get your bids back so that you know that you're doing apples to apples and oranges to oranges. So that shouldn't take very long to get all the contractors through. You burn one day, you get all your bids back. You want to also ask them for referrals at that time. So that you can make calls to see how well have they performed for other people. Did they show up on time? Did they leave a clean work site when they left? Did you have any problems getting in touch with them if you needed to call them back for additional work that needed to be done? These are crucial things that you need to understand in evaluating of a contractor. Now, if a contractor shows up and he doesn't have a tape measure, he doesn't have a truck, he doesn't look like a contractor, he probably isn't a contractor. If you get a bad feeling in your vibe about this guy doesn't really seem to be doing the work, it's probably true. Do not mess with that person. Put him to the wayside. Another telltale sign for me is a contractor who talks constantly, nonstop, telling you how great he is as a contractor. If you're a great contractor, your work is going to talk for yourself, and your referrals are going to talk for yourself. I'm telling you, if a person comes in talking nonstop about how great they are, check them off the list. This has just been a proven contact for me. So once you get all the bids back, you're going to evaluate them and pick your contractor. You're either going to go with a general contractor, which has the ability to sub out all the different parts, and you're going to pay one person, and he's going to make sure the whole job is done. Or you're going to play the general contractor, where you're coordinating between the different contractors, and you'll spend more time there. Or the third is, you have great skills and you're going to do the job yourself, and you're only going to call in subcontractors as you need them to fill the gaps for where your skills lay. Either way, you're going to evaluate the process, you're going to evaluate their bids, and also the cheapest bid isn't always the best bid. If you get say you get an electrical estimate to replace the 100 amp electric box, and you get a bid of $1,400, $1,500, and $800. Now your mind is automatically going to go, hey, I'm going to go with the $800 bid. Now you got to ask yourself, there's a certain amount of materials that's going to go into that electric box. You've got to get a permit, and especially if the guy is not pulling the permit himself, that's not going to end well. I'm going to tell you now, the $800 job that you spend, and you spend $800, whether it happens well or not, and then the inspector comes out and says, who did this? And now he's going to say, take all that out and start over again. So now you're spending the $800 plus the $1,500 to get your job done, when you should have chosen the one who was best skilled with the best recommendation at one price. But you're not going to believe that. You're going to pick the $800 one. I know you are. But you'll only do it once, maybe twice, but you'll never do it 3 times. Trust me, I've done this over and over. It sounds good. You want to go with the $800 guy. But I'm telling you, resist. Resist that urge. Make it up somewhere else. But there are other places that you can add and subtract. But your major contractors, don't skimp on the easy, cheap people. You will kick yourself, and you'll say, man, I wish I had. And you'll go back to this point on the tape, and you'll say, and your wife is going to tell you, you remember that time you were watching that video? I told you not to pick that guy. But enough on that, because you'll call me later and say, you know, Tim, I remember going back over that piece, and I knew I shouldn't have picked that guy, but I did anyway. All right, so now once you've gone through all your bids and you've evaluated which one you want to pick and choose, now we have to come back to, how are we going to control our contractors? What type of paperwork will we use in order to make sure that we get the best product, they know what they need to do, and we know where they're at in the process? I use an independent contractor agreement, and in this agreement it spells out what task we want them to do, what task I'm going to do, how they will be paid, and that they're not an employee of mine, and that how we're going to end this project. Also, I attach the scope of work to this document. It's very, very clear. Now, no one is confused as to what is going to happen. Also, that's a place where you can put a lot of your automatic things that you do all the time. You may have 2 colors that you use. You have a wall color, you have a trim color. You always use brushed nickel doorknobs and hinges. Those things that you consistently do all the time, always include in your independent contractor agreement, because it just makes it simple and systematizes what you're doing. Now, the independent contractor agreement is basically your contract with them. The contractor may want to have you sign his agreement. That's okay, but I typically want to have my agreement because I know how it reads, and I don't want a bunch of legalese stuff that's coming back to bite me later on. So in the independent contractor agreement, you're also going to want to get your W-2 and your EIN number from your contractor, any general liability insurance that he may have, any documentation up front before you give him a check, because once you give him a check, it may be hard for you to get that information back from him. So once you get all those information pieces, and you're going to go through and create your independent contractor agreement, you then set up another appointment for both of you to walk through this agreement. I usually take 2 to 3 copies. One copy is going to be for him and one copy is going to be for you, and sometimes you make a mistake on one or whatnot. So you go through the contract. Everyone is understanding clear on the phase pay. Now, phase pay means what items are you going to have complete in order for you to say, I am ready to receive a check. He's going to let you know that he is finished with this phase, in order for him to know that he can now get paid. You're going to go and investigate or have somebody that you are working with that has that type of construction experience that understands that, yes, that phase is done. Typically, it goes demo phase, you're going to have the framing phase, initial drywall phase go up, and you're prepped and ready for painting. That may be one phase. The next phase is you've painted everything, you've got cabinets up, that's the next phase. The next phase is you're all ready for flooring to go down, you've set all the equipment, the bathroom's all put back together, and you're done with that phase and you're moving outside, you're going to paint outside. You may have 4 or 5 different phases, and each dollar amount that's associated with that phase is clearly identified in your scope of work and your independent contractor agreement. So that minimizes the confusion that you may have with a contractor. Money is the #1 issue that you will have a falling out with your contractor. And then the quality of work. To what degree do you want the work done? That has to be clearly communicated too. Like in drywall, there's several different finishes that you can have. You want to make sure that's known what type and degree of finish you want done so that there's no confusion, because that, as they bid the job out, determines the labor amount. How many hours are they going to have involved in order to get that result that you're looking for? So make sure that you're very clear about that. You also want to talk about timeline. How long will it take this person to get through the phases? That has to be agreed upon. And inside my independent contractor agreement, I have penalties and bonuses. If you hit certain times, if you're done early, I want to give you a bonus. If you take out longer than you agreed upon, they're going to be a penalty, so much per day or so much per week that you're going to assess on his final payment that you're going to deduct, that he's not going to get paid. Now, they normally don't like that, but hey, that's just kind of the way it is. Then, once you have that, if you've got multiple contractors, you may need to have a coordination meeting depending on the size of the scope of your work, meaning who's going in first. If you're going to do like a gut rehab, you're going to start obviously with the roof, get the roof on, you get it dried in, get your windows in, so forth. Then what priority comes in? You got HVAC going first, then you've got plumbing, and then you've got electric. These people need to know when they're coming in, because let's assume that you put electric lines in first and then now you need to put ductwork in. Well, you're going to have to pay for that job twice, because you're going to have to cut out all those electric lines in order to get the ductwork in and then put the electric around it. So there's just sequencing of processes that you just need to know, and that's obviously where your coach comes into play, because you can coordinate out of order and you're going to end up paying for a job twice, which nobody wants to do. Another thing coordinating between individuals is who's responsible for their trash. Who's opening up the wall, who's closing the wall. You always get a finger pointing issue if you got multiple contractors there on site and you haven't chosen to use a general contractor. Even if you use a general contractor, you still get pointing fingers. But you need to make it clearly identifiable where somebody's scope of work starts and where another person stops. Just in order to minimize those conversations that you have. And I'm big on trash. Get your trash out of my site every day, 30 minutes before end of work day. Sweep up and clean up so that you don't have a liability issue, people walking through, falling, hurting themselves. stepping on a nail or so forth. It's just a clean work site, and it gives you a fresh start. When you start the next day, you walk into an environment that's clean. It also allows you to know where your equipment is, what products do you have there on site, and what's next. It also is quickly to identify if somebody comes in and breaks in during the night. You know obviously what is taken and not taken. So those are just kind of things that you want to stay aware of. The next thing is your material list. Once you've got the contractor going and so forth, you're going to need to agree on how is the material going to arrive at your location. Are you having the contractor pick it up? Are you having the respective building material companies pull the material for you? Are you having it delivered? What are you having your contractor do? I like for the particular company to drop ship my product generally in 2 different phases. One, so you don't have so much material there that you're walking over it and you have a problem. If you've got a 2-car garage or something, you can deliver it all in. That's great. And have it dispersed where you can work through your material, but yet you've got enough space to lay things out. If you have it delivered, make sure that you identify each material according to the manifest that came in. They're not going to be motivated to do that, but that needs to be part of your independent contractor agreement. They're going to check and make sure that all materials come in, because what will happen is you'll get to the end of the project and they go, oh, that light didn't come in. The light fixture didn't come in. Now, 2 weeks later, going back to Home Depot and saying, hey, you remember that delivery that you gave us 2 weeks ago? There was one item that wasn't delivered. They're going to go, yeah, right. So make sure that they check it off the day that it comes in, and you verify it the next time you come in to the job site. I also give my contractors a Home Depot card or a Lowe's card, $200 or $300, that with instructions that if you don't give me the receipts that equal the total amount on the card, I'm deducting it off of your payment. So that's a real good way. They keep the receipts, but it's also for them to go and get little bitty items that you may have forgotten that they need in order to complete the job. You don't want to have to go and run back and give them, a can of caulk just to complete their job. So you give them the autonomy to go and get what they need to get. They're responsible, and you've got a record of what they went to get. So that's one way I handle materials. It also how you're going to pay for it. Are you giving them a card, or they're going to call in from the location and pay for it over the phone, or are you going to go and pay for it the night before? All of that you have to work out on how it's going to work best with your company. Once you get the materials taken care of, it's the labor cost. When you fill out the independent contractor agreement, you have to agree upon how many days you think it's going to be, and then the breakdown and time zone of labor. That's a specific line item that you're going to have right off the bat. And typically you want to work with a contractor who's not going to nickel and dime you every time you've got a change order. And that's something you need to discuss too. If I run into a situation on a job site where it's a large divergence from where we talked about, how are you going to handle the change order? First of all, you want them to stop. Do not allow them to work further, call you, hey, we've run into a situation. You both come to the location, agree upon what your method is going to be to get past this problem, give a dollar amount to it, and that gets added into your independent contractor agreement. Do not try to go from memory, and never authorize him to move forward without a piece of paper that identifies the price that you agreed upon and the time that it's going to add to the project. That will come back to bite you if you do not do that. So once you get labor handled, controlling your contractor should be much easier at this point in how you're going to do that. The next phase is going to be, to what degree do you want the finishes done? Coordination of permits and inspections. Who's going to be there during the inspection phase? Who's pulling the permits? Under whose name? Who's going to be there when the inspectors are there to sign off on the inspection? All of this needs to be coordinated between you, the owner, and the contractor. This will make things much, much smoother. Any drawings that need to be done, who's going to do the drawings? So these things you need to identify up front. Now, as you're going through the phases and you have inspectors involved, that is something you want to definitely have as part of your milestones in your independent contractor agreement. In St. Louis, where we're at, you get a card that sticks on your front window or whatnot. Anytime an inspector comes through, he needs to sign his name. You need to verify that that has been signed off on. Do not take the word of your contractor that says, oh yeah, they came by and we passed. If you visually don't see it on the inspection card, you need to call the inspector and say, did we pass or did we not? I noticed that you didn't sign my card. They have to sign your card or nothing is official, shall we say. And there's multiple stages in that contracting permit phase. There's generally a rough-in phase. There's a permit to cover, which means, an example, like your electric lines have been run and they go to the back of the electric box and everything is good, and he's been there. Now he says, now you can drywall over top of it. You drywall over top of it. And then there's the final phase where all the outlets are put in, the switches are put in, the cover plates are in. Basically, you're ready to walk off the job. You call him back in for your final inspection and he signs off on it. All of those phases need to be done. If you're plumbing, you're putting a new stack in, or you're putting new bathrooms in, those phases have to be inspected and signed off on. That is critical, because if you go to sell the house and you have an open permit, you're going to have a tremendous challenge trying to get the inspector to come back through and sign off on the work that you've done when you're ready to close on this particular property and you didn't close out your permits. So just understand that is a considerable consideration for closing out your property. Now, this is the final phase. You're ending the project, you've passed your permits. Now you want to do your final walkthrough to sign off on with your contractor. Typically you want to hold back in the final payment at least 10% after you do the final payout, just for callbacks. The buyer's going to have their inspector go through, and there's always those Mickey Mouse things that they come up with, generally $300 to $400 worth of repairs that need to be done. You want to make sure that your contractor is going to come back and finish out those last little details, and that's normally $300 to $400 to $500 you want to hold back out of his contract, so that he's motivated to come back and finish those repair items. You may determine the cost of additional work that may not have been in his scope of work, but the new inspector has identified that work that needs to be done in order for you to sell your house. You guys, once again, will talk and negotiate what that price is. But when you do your final walkthrough and you close them out and you say, great, this looks wonderful, you let them go, and you've got a great relationship. You're happy, he's performed well, and you've got a great product, and you can use them over and over again. One thing I find in real estate, if you have 2 or 3 good crews that you can always go back to, keep them happy. They like working for a person that pays on time, pays well, gives clear instructions. They like working for those. And obviously you like working with individuals who perform on time and get done and give you a great product. So that is the entire aspect that you're looking for in a great rehab. Now, once you've got the contractor out of the way, things that I do additionally are give out gift cards to the neighbor. I generally do this when I first get there, and I do it again at the end, because your activity is going to be a lot less once you stake the sign in the yard and say, hey, it's up for sale. You want your neighbors to give a little eyeball action on your property. So I go and give them a gift card, St. Louis Bread Company or whatever, a little $10 to $15 gift card that says, hey, I thank you and I appreciate you in advance. If you see some activity that shouldn't be going on my property, call me and let me know. It also fosters ideas, and sometimes you'll get properties out of that. Neighbor says, hey, I want you to rehab my property. I'm thinking about selling my property, or I've got something somewhere else. You would be amazed at the number of leads that you get just from talking to your neighbors when you go by. So that wraps up the rehab process that we have. Understand that there will be several documents that we're going to have in our handouts of student manual that will show you each process and allow you to have an Excel spreadsheet that will walk you through some of the aspects, and there the independent contractor agreement, multiple agreements and documents that you'll find in your handbook that will walk you through, plus the action list that you'll need. That'll all be in this section. This is one of the largest sections that you'll have to go through, and it is the most important aspect and part that you'll have to master. But it's also the most rewarding and the most exhilarating part of the actual process. When you get on the backside, definitely plan a reward for yourself. Take your wife out, or take your husband out once you've completed this process, and just enjoy, because it is generally a grueling 5 to 7 week process, but it is so exciting. I want to thank you, and I hope you have much success in rehabbing your first project. Thank you.